Hello, hello. Welcome to yet another episode of Disruption Talks, where we invite top experts to discuss digital acceleration, winning strategies, innovation, and scaling products. In this episode, we have the pleasure of hosting an expert in all things mobility, maps, geo and location-based technologies, B2C marketplaces, automotive, complex backend platforms, and autonomous driving. A seasoned product leader, passionate about product management in tech companies with over 10 years of experience in both startups and large global companies in Europe, US, and Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Adrian Pica, VP of Product at Bolt. Want to see some hands in the air on the chat. Hi, Adrian. Welcome.
Hi, Pedro. Thanks so much for the invitation and for the nice intro.
Let's get into it. It would be nice to start by knowing you and your background a little bit. So before joining Bolt, you had the opportunity to taste the flavors of being an entrepreneur. If you could give us a short personal background, that would be perfect.
Yes. The way I entered into product management was a bit of a less of a usual path. But then if you talk with a lot of product managers, everyone has a quite interesting path, but it's not the normal, let's say, path that is expected coming from the technology side. My background is I finished law school, so nobody's perfect. But then my focus was on digital marketing, and I studied. I had master's in marketing, and that's when I focused more towards like digital marketing and digital product building. Even though a lot of my experience was mostly in like brick and mortar businesses and a lot of entrepreneurial stuff, I had like a car dealership, I had a restaurant, I had an advertising and web design agency. I did a bunch of stuff in the entrepreneurial part, and then I slowly moved towards the digital part. I had two startups. One of them failed spectacularly. The other one was a small success, let's say, in the sense that it was an exit, but it was not the kind of exit that allows you to buy an island. It was the kind of exit that allows you to just look for a nicer job. Both of them very interesting experience in their own way. A lot of learnings from there. But then I started spending more time within product management and within larger organizations. So I was always mixing this like entrepreneurial focus and a lot of startup events, mentoring, training, workshops, and so on. And then on the other side, working more in product management in larger and larger organizations. And I think I've enjoyed it quite well, because a lot of these large organizations actually have a very intrapreneurial approach when it comes especially to startup managers, and the type of responsibility / freedom that you get as a product manager. So I was like professionally very happy within that environment, even though it wasn't entrepreneurial. But if the company was intrapreneurial enough, then it was definitely very exciting to work there. So once I kind of moved towards more company-related product management activities, I worked in a company called Telenav, which was a Silicon Valley company that acquired a German-Romanian company. I'm originally from Romania. So I worked with them for a while. It was in the mobility sector, automotive navigation, mostly B2B. So there's a bit of B2B experience there as well. And then then I moved to Grab in Southeast Asia, which is like the Bolt or Uber of Southeast Asia in terms of comparison. So again, mobility marketplace, that largest super app in Asia, biggest tech company in the region. Extremely fortunate to have been working with some super smart people and have been through a lot of interesting stages of the company. And then eventually moved to Bolt in Estonia, when the company barely raised the round of money that made them a unicorn. So they just passed the 1 billion valuation. Obviously, a very inspired choice. Now the company is valued at 8.4 billion. So a lot of growth has happened in a lot of the domains, the company and the business itself. And yes, we managed to scale the domains that I'm responsible for in Bolt. But the common thing, as you said, in the professional experience, is a lot of the things that I was working with are in the area of mobility and real-time, on-demand type of consumer-facing interactions.
Nice. Thank you for such a complete intro. You touched 2 points that I hope we can talk about in a bit. So Grab and the most recent Bolt valuation. But I wanted to ask you still on the topic of entrepreneurship. Is this a background that you search for in new hires? Is there a specific background, or as you said, there's product managers can have many different backgrounds. What is it that you search for when you're hiring product managers or product leaders?
Mm-hmm. Good point. So when we look at the product managers that we would want to have in the team at Bolt, we are basing the criteria that we're using for recruitment in kind of like the type of problems that the respective PMs would need to solve. And we have this concept called extreme ownership, in which the product manager truly is as close as possible to the CEO of the product. Like in many occasions, this like, hey, you're the CEO of the product is used for product managers to, like, we're not paying you well enough, but like you get this fancy title that you can't even use. You're the CEO of the product, but you're not CEO, you're just a product manager.
You're the CEO without the authority, right?
Exactly. Like you can't hire, you can't fire, you can't increase salaries, you can't decrease salaries, but then everything else says in terms of responsibilities, you have them.
Exactly.
So use leadership as a leverage, which is basically what a lot of product managers excel at, right? So if you think from this perspective, and we have this like extreme ownership model in Bolt, in which when you're responsible for a domain, you are truly the responsible for the domain. And if like past the first quarter of onboarding, after that, we expect the respective product manager to become the expert and the domain authority within the company, and everyone else should learn from that respective person. And again, that's the responsible person should be the one that is coming with ideas and future development as future scope enhancement for the respective domain. And the role of the manager is to kind of guide them through the larger vision of the company and the more longer term setup and setting up the necessary resources to get there. But the actual path has to be envisioned, proposed, and traveled by the respective product managers. And the reverse to that is that whenever we see that people are doing okay, but they're not doing great, we also act. So either we are looking and we only make offers to product managers that show that they have these skills within the recruitment process, but we are also extremely demanding afterwards, after we hire the product managers, and we demand that level of exceptional execution on their side, not just warm body, good PM, but nothing spectacular, but good PM. That's not something that we are happy with, at least not in the current stage of development, where we expect a lot of the development to come from insights from the respective product manager. And I want to highlight, because I'm not saying that like one thing is good and the other thing is bad. And this refers to a lot of the things that we will talk today, because one company is doing something good, the other company is doing something bad. Like it's most likely both companies are doing what they think is best for them, for their particular setup, for their particular moment in the evolution of a company. So when I'm saying that's the type of product managers that we're recruiting, it's because it fits our current needs, like the current growth and the current challenges and lack of certainty during the decision-making process just demands that we have product managers that are able to make decisions with incomplete data, without having the whole picture. We need to be able to rely on them, that they have the intellectual and professional maturity to guide themes and to guide large budgets in certain occasions through an unknown land. So this is less of, like what let's take like Microsoft, for example, right? And you are a product manager in Office, which is like an absolutely amazing company, an absolutely amazing product, and an
very
absolutely
mature, very well established. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like obviously a highly skilled product manager needs to work there, but I'm expecting that there'd be more of the roadmap handling from an upper level to someone who is at the product manager level, or probably at the senior manager level, senior product manager. You would have less ownership of like, hey, let's monetize my product differently. No, you will probably not change the way that Office is being monetized, but you would be doing extremely important, extremely meaningful work, but it's going to be focused on a small part of the product itself, and you will have less leverage over the whole business. And that is the right product manager they probably need there, and that's extremely important for them. What we need now, it's because we are in a different moment in company growth. We're like doubling valuation, doubling orders, doubling number of employees every year. So, like building, dismantling, and rebuilding a process in which you work with your team as a product manager is also part of the job, which is why we want product managers that also know a bit of project management and a wider, let's say, area of skills, just because there's a lot of growth that's being involved in a short period of time. So with this in mind, yes, we do look for people that have entrepreneurial background or entrepreneurial capabilities, but this does not mean that people that don't have an entrepreneurial experience are not a great fit for us. It's just that a lot of the characteristics that entrepreneurs have usually match or result in having successful careers at Bolt.
Got it. You touched one of the topics I was keeping for later, but let's jump there. So yeah, you're growing at an incredible pace, right? 75 million customers, over 45 plus countries. It's not just growth; it's also width, right? You're spread everywhere. So, what are the biggest challenges, and how do you actually? What are your answers to scale product at this scale and pace? I think one of them you just answered is to hire people with capacity to handle uncertainty on their own. Are there any other key challenges and solutions for those challenges that you can point?
Yeah, just to add a bit on the data side. So when we are to add up the ride-hailing vertical, the food vertical, and the rentals like scooters and bicycles and Bolt Drive verticals, we have more than 100 million customers in all the verticals combined in 45 countries and around 400 cities globally, which is in itself quite impressive. And we're also very fortunate to have like around 2.5 million drivers and partners globally. So that is quite a large size for a company coming from Estonia, coming from Eastern Europe, Northern Eastern Europe, but still part of Europe where startups were not traditionally coming from, even though Estonia kind of like exceeds compared to all the other countries in the region. So one of the things that I think helped us a lot with scaling was the laser focus on the main business KPIs that our leadership was able first to identify, build the business around it, and then manage to implement that and support within the KPIs in the existing businesses. I think one of the key things that we were able to achieve as a company is to focus on making sure that we're extremely efficient. And we managed to keep our costs extremely low. I think it's one of those like a combination of the Eastern European approach of like making things cheaper and like the Nordic approach of doing things extremely focused in the right way, which is probably ingrained in the DNA of the company. But we were indeed able to have digital products and operational execution on a similar level with other existing players, which were much better funded. But because we did not have access to funding, we did not have the North America or Western Europe access to funding as a company. So we just had to serve the same needs in the markets with way less financing. That resulted in us having to build the whole business with having lower costs in mind. And this is actually what ended up helping us to scale faster globally. We had lower operational costs in the production side that allowed us to have lower margins that we take from our driver partners or restaurants. That allows us to have lower prices to the end consumers. We can take less money from the drivers because having lower prices, we have more demand. So customers will come towards us easier than it would come towards other companies with higher prices. So we need to spend less on marketing because of that. So we managed to build that flywheel quite efficiently based on being extremely careful on the cost side. And then we were able to pass on those cost savings to our driver partners and to our end users, whether they are using ride-hailing, rentals, or food delivery.
And so in practice, what does it mean to, how did you solve it on the product side? So does that mean, how do you decide if you need local tech and product teams for each market that you approach? Do you do it full remote? Of course, you always have physical operations, but how do you organize product in order to scale and maintain costs lower? Because obviously, as you said, your competitors were already on the market, were better funded. What did that mean in practice?
So in practice, it meant that we did ruthless prioritization for each respective domains, and we were apparently using the right metrics, and we were prioritizing extensively on the metrics. So what I mean by that, whenever you have a roadmap of what you plan to do for the next year or for next month, every product manager needs to have a list of priorities, which is based on a number of things. Now, we made that prioritization to be mostly focused on the ROI. And the reason for that is simple. It's not just like in business, if you have high ROI means good. But besides that, we were optimizing for the higher ROI first. So what that means is with the smallest amount of engineering work that we were able to allocate, and remember, we were not as well funded as other companies, so we had less engineering resources available. So what that meant is because we knew that we had less engineering resources and product resources available, we spent more time on choosing the right tasks to work on. And if we choose the right order, that means the added value just impacts the whole business way faster because we prioritize the right stuff. And we prioritize the things that have the highest impact on business in short term. And it just built this like flying wheel that we kept on being able to add high value while maintaining a low cost of adding high value. And this was the right approach, at least for us. And again, it's for us because we had a certain type of competition that was extremely well funded. They hired way more than they needed in a lot of locations. So they ended up having a high cost of serving customers. So when it came to the actual price and the actual selection of price for the end consumer, it was noticeable that one company had lower prices than other companies, so they were just naturally going towards that area. And it seemed that just because of the setup that we had, it was much more sustainable, and we were able to move much further through this the roadmap process of selecting the highest ROI items. So we usually don't build fluffy, blingy, shiny, swipey experiences that would be, and I'm not saying this is bad. There are an insane number of companies, like the largest tech company in the world is based around the idea of having an exceptional user experience. They just so happen to make this, right? Yeah. And a bunch of other products, right? So I'm not saying that designing user experience is not important. It's just with the set of challenges that we were given and the set of competitors and the funding available, we have chosen this setup in which we want to deliver high quality of service at the lowest price. We believe that this is the right value proposition for the business verticals that we are in. And this is very, to make a comparison, this is quite similar to Amazon's approach, right? If you look at Amazon, it's not the most beautiful site in the world, for sure. But it seems to be working well for them as a company.
So when you were at the beginning, we're still talking a little bit about the past, but when you were approaching new markets and there was already your competitors were there, right? How do you make this decision of, as a product leader, of not just copying your competitors because they have they already offer feature A or B? How do you instill in your teams this mindset that what you just described, right? Like we need to do what's best for us, but if it's working for our main competitors, how do you instill this kind of innovation and creativity in your team that is not just to copy what the other teams, what the other companies are doing?
I think this comes down, and again, I've joined about 2 years ago. At that time, Bolt was an already successful company, quite successful in this field. It was already on the market for a couple of years, so most of those decisions have been, and most of the like high-level thinking was already done. So it was already done by the existing leadership. So I can share some insights on that. But whenever we were looking at this growth opportunity, we always kept in mind this value proposition that we're having. So the hard value proposition that we were always saying is that we can give you the mobility service, whether that's ride-hailing, delivery, or rentals. We can give it to you faster, and we can give it to you cheaper. And the way that we looked at the roadmap is to understand what are the items that are bringing the most value to what we want to highlight as a high value proposition. So we were probably deprioritizing things that did not have a quick, meaningful impact on the business. They did not have a quick, meaningful impact on the user side or on the driver side, but we focus on these items that deliver the largest amount of value. This allowed us to descope some of the items that were less important. And to your point, this is exactly what we encouraged our product managers to do, to think critically. Like, we don't want to copy what other companies are doing, not because they are wrong, but because they are given a different set of market opportunities. Different fundraising, different opportunity to hire people, different markets. They started at a different time. So everyone has like a different thought process to go through and find the right setup for them. We found that this was the right setup for us. And apparently, looking how the company grew, we had a good approach on how to do things. And it kind of inspired, and this is probably one of the things that makes me the happiest about working at Bolt, is this very sane culture that we're having, because it's very objective and very rational. Whenever we talk amongst our colleagues, everyone is like truly happy comparing it to other experience in tech companies. We found that like the culture and the values that we have in Bolt were very aligned with them, and they come extremely naturally. And this is probably also related to this like Northern mentality of being extremely rational and extremely focused. And then it was passed on to the whole company, but especially into product, because we're responsible for a large part of the business. And it got into our way of thinking that we need to think critically about what competitors are doing, because even though it might seem exactly, it might be a good idea for their case, but we need to think critically through our lenses to see if it's worth doing for us. And that's why we were having different approaches than traditionally you would see in ride-hailing companies in some areas of our product.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I just wanted to hear basically what you said. It starts from leadership, right? And leadership didn't even put that option on the table. So yes. That's great. Going a little bit back to your personal habits, we can jump into the company prism in a sec. How do you remain in touch with user needs, right? If you're up there, you're not really seeing what teams are doing on a day-to-day basis. What are some of the habits that you have to remain in touch with the constantly shifting user needs, especially in today's world, right? Like pandemics and so on.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question, because the obvious approach is to keep in touch with your users, and I still do that quite often. And I try to engage in conversation with drivers whenever I'm in a vehicle, or to have a small chit chat with some of the delivery couriers, because it's easier to understand their daily problems. And this is actually one of the areas that it's quite important for a product manager to, especially if your product is so closely working with operations. You need to understand the life of your operations colleagues, because there might be a lot of product growth that can be unlocked by understanding how the operation side of the business is going. So you talk to your operations colleagues, you understand some of the problems that you have on the supply side, and then you also try to spend time in user research to understand the demand side, to understand the consumers. Now, the more you get responsibility in the company, you need to abstract probably yourself from doing this like direct individual tasks. So now I'm relying a lot on blogs and articles that I'm reading, but I also rely a lot of the very frequent one-on-ones that I have with my colleagues within the platform team, but also with my colleagues in the respective business verticals. Because in platform, as we operate at Bolt, we're kind of like powering everything that the vertical team needs, which is why on platform side, we need to understand what are the main KPIs for the ride-hailing business, for the delivery business, and for the rentals business as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you touched there on the fact that you are kind of a horizontal team that touches all the verticals. If you could explain what are the verticals, just for the audience to have some context before we jump into the next questions, that would be useful.
Yes. So short explanation is, as I said, we are extremely focused on being very mindful about being an efficient company and keeping costs low. So one of the ways that we do this is to pay a lot of attention on how we build things on the engineering side. So obviously, being a location-based company, a lot of our verticals are in need of very similar services. So if we would end up building everything in each of the domain verticals, we would end up replicating a lot of stuff, double building, triple building, and so on. So it makes sense to have one team that is handling that complexity. And like one of the simplest examples is the geo and maps side, which requires quite a lot of domain expertise and understanding. But it's also quite repetitive because it's like the map is 80% of the screen, 70% of the screen in most of the mobility apps. And a lot of the interactions are deducted or influenced by what the user is seeing on the app or what the driver or courier sees in that part of the screen. So obviously it's a very complex domain that touches upon the business as a whole. But if you spend a lot of engineering time in each domain vertical working on that, you duplicate and triplicate the amount of work, and you also don't gain all the domain expertise within one team. You'll have a lot of engineers doing bits and pieces repeatedly here and there, but no one would have the full picture saying, hey, there's like, there's an absolutely incremental level of technology with this domain that we can apply, but we don't know because we're not focused on that. So it came as a natural way of the company growing, that we got to the point where we saw a lot of this like work duplication, and we decided that we want to be more efficient. So then we grouped some of these domains within platform where we have dedicated teams that support all the three verticals with all their use cases, current and future ones. And the goal there is obviously to build it with the right architecture and modularity in mind for the longer term vision. So you don't have to go and have, constant technical depth and constant re-architecturing every couple of quarters, because we're just like throwing spaghetti code because we have a problem now, which is what all startups are doing. And it's not bad, it's great. As long as your spaghetti code works and it brings money to business, it's a business, right? Like it's not a code beauty contest. It's very important to remember that you don't get prizes for scalability to 10 million users if you have 1 million users. There's no one in the market to congratulate you for that. But that was like this approach to have like a stronger platform there just is based on our fundamental way of thinking. Like we always strive to do things better, more cost efficient, and with higher efficiency, because we fundamentally believe that this is the domains and the verticals that we are in. This is an area which is extremely cost sensitive. So the companies that would manage to give the highest quality of service at the lowest possible cost are the companies that will naturally get more supply and more demand. Like they will naturally get more drivers and naturally get more users, or at least acquire them at a lower cost than competition. So if you imagine this through like a flywheel perspective, you just make it work more efficiently. And there's like a bunch of articles and discussions like, can companies make ride hailing profitable or delivery profitable or like scooter rentals profitable? And like, yes, we can. We are profitable in most of the cities that we are present in. Like, we're obviously still growing and reinvesting the profit in other markets and in growth, but in a lot of the markets where we're not investing in growth anymore, where we are already market leaders, like it is profitable if it's built in a sane way with the right business considerations in mind.
Got it. So everything that would create duplication, you packaged it in one team, and then you have the verticals, right? So you have Could you describe the three verticals?
So the verticals, like first vertical is obviously the most well-known one, which is the ride-hailing vertical, the one that we first opened the company with. The second one is the delivery. So we're including here food delivery, like cooked food delivery, but also grocery deliveries, and the newly open Bolt Market, the 10 to 15 minutes quick delivery that you can use the Bolt food app for. And then also there's the rentals, in which probably you've all seen the green scooters. There's a bunch of cities where we have electric bicycles as well. And we also have launched last year Bolt Drive, which is the free floating fleet of vehicles where you can use your phone to open a car, drive it around, park it anywhere in the city, lock it, and basically pay for the amount that you've been using the car for. And the goal there is obviously to make sure that this is like a lower cost than if you would have used the ride-hailing service that would have come with a driver included as well. So and the Bolt Drive part, we are expanding this product into several markets this year, because we saw that from a business perspective, it works quite well, and users were extremely receptive to this service. So these are the three verticals of the business, like the delivery, the ride hailing, and the rentals. And then you have this like platform layer that I'm responsible for, that has a bunch of services such as like the GeoOp, as I said, the user account and identity part, the communication part that handles the chat and the voice over IP that you see in the app, but also the SMSs that you see when you log in the app. Then there's the internal A/B test platform and a bunch of other internal services that are used across all our verticals.
So you're trying to put everything that doesn't duplicate in platform team. Does that create additional challenges? I understand that, of course, it's going to save money and it's going to create teams that are highly specialized. But does that create other challenges? For example, when you want to experiment something with maps, are your teams able to just experiment, or do they need to have very close cooperation, almost to the point where they are blocked or they have unnecessary dependencies with one of the verticals or several of the verticals? How do you see this, the pros and cons for this decision?
Of course. So like there's a rule, right? The more complexity you have, the more challenges and problems you're going to have to keep everyone in sync. And this is always a problem of scale-ups, right? Like when you move from the startup phase, or let's put it in different, when you move from like the idea stage, you move into the like problem to solution fit, in which you experiment and do MVPs, and you're trying to figure out what you need to build. And then you get to the problem solution fit, where like, hey, we have like, you get to product to market fit, where like we have a product, we have a market, we have something that looks like a business model, and you start raising money. And then you actually set up a company and start expanding to get into the growth area. So at every single stage of this, you have a different set of challenges. And obviously, one of the reasons why startups work so much better than large corporations in this particular stage of the innovation is because they are extremely agile. There's little to no process. There's a high degree of ownership towards everyone involved. And things, prototyping and learning happens much faster, right? Like even when we look at how we operate internally in the ride-hailing vertical, it's way more mature. There's way more data. A lot of the plans that we have there involve short-term planning, but also mid to long-term planning and a bunch of calculation on how it would impact the business. There's a lot more thought involved into how are we actually building this from an architectural perspective. Now, when we look at, for example, our food and our rentals, which would be similar to what let's say younger startup would have as challenges, you see that the value in learning is much higher than the value in process. So when you as a product leader, you need to constantly monitor the value of learning and the value of process. And at very early stages, the value of learning is so high that you can just throw spaghetti code at the problem, make it work, collect the data, and learn. This will do more for your business than any perfectly engineered, architectured, scalable code. Just because you're in the stage of the company where for the business, the learning is much more valuable. Now, when you get to the stage where process and execution and planning has a much higher business impact than the novelty of it, that's when you need to start adding layers and layers of process. And you can go from this to all the way to like an extremely efficient company that manages all the process. Like when you look at the outsourcing model, and again, everything that I say, I'm not saying that one thing is good, one thing is bad.
It depends on the situation. It depends on your
thing
stage.
Outsourcing companies need to do extremely well is to be ridiculously effective and efficient with the time of the employees. So that means a lot of finely tuned process. This is not a simple task. It's an extremely difficult task to implement such an efficiency and execution process, but that is exactly their value proposition. And companies that have a harder time implementing that will just acquire that service for less from an outsourcing company. So it's pretty much the same thing when you're looking at the scale up. As a product leader, you need to decide the right level of process that you have for your growth of the business, and you kind of like mix the risk and the gains of the two, and you slowly start adding a bit more and more process, and then it kind of like, you know, the process, the amount of process that you put should directly correlate with the complexity of the task at hand, but also with the intellectual capabilities of your team, right? So if you have a team of 10 extremely smart people, you probably need very little process than if you would have a team of like lower skilled people. And again, this is not good or bad. It's just if you're a manager, that's what you need to interact with, right? And then based on the resources that you have, you can set up a work environment which is like more process heavy or less process heavy, depending on the problems to solve and the quality of the team members that you have.
So I understand that this decision of having maps and along with other things packed into platform was one that was also made because you already had ride hailing, which was quite mature, and it was worth to do it while you launch other ones, right? So
exactly, yes.
Doing a segue, because you mentioned both markets there, so connecting with your recent investment, you got approximately 700 million investment at a $8.4 billion valuation. We noticed that you launched bulk markets in Warsaw.
Yes,
earlier than this investment round came, or maybe earlier than it became public. Was Warsaw your learning experience? Did you use it as a learning experience market?
No, usually our learning experience market is Tallinn. For a variety of reasons. But anyway, after that, we do a bunch of tests in other locations as well. We usually have Tallinn as a testing ground. Obviously, the headquarters is there. We have a large number of colleagues, so we can release a lot of features for employees only. There's like about 3,000 of us. Large part of them actually based in Tallinn, so you can have a lot of feedback within the first couple of days of usage from Bolt employees alone. So like a mini city.
So you created a city instead of going out into the market and recruiting users. You just created a mini city. Yeah.
Exactly. So that like we can test services, but like we can also test the quality of them. We can also spot bugs before they hit our consumers and so on. So we do test a lot of these services there, and we started with Bolt Market. Like we made a decision to move into this like fast delivery grocery space couple of months ago, actually more than 6, and we opened the first stores, and we already had an expansion plan for last year, and that expansion plan was kind of like already accounted for in the previous investment round, which came like not that far ago. So we kind of had that growth plan and already in process. Obviously, the continuation of the investment is reflected in the current round that we raised, because we're going to use it obviously to grow the existing business into more countries or acquire more market share. But we're also going to finance some of the new launches that we're having, one of them being Bolt Market, that you'll see more and more of in Poland, and also Bolt Drive, which is one of the services that we're extremely proud of, because it's been going extremely well in the markets where we launched it in Estonia, and we managed to have an exceptional price at it, just like we have with our scooter service, where we came on the market at a much lower price than most of our competitors. And we plan to do the same with Bolt Drive, which is also a service that will be seen in Poland quite shortly. But again, like, Poland is one of the most important markets for us. It's large country. We have one of the three main offices of Bolt is in Warsaw. So we have three main offices. First one is obviously in Tallinn. Second one is in Bucharest, in Romania. Third one is in Warsaw. So we have a large local presence there. It's one of the largest market in this part of Europe. Also from orders perspective, number of orders, but also size of the orders is quite important. Again, Poland is one of the countries that is doing quite well financially in this side of Europe. So it's quite obvious that it's one of our key markets. And as you said previously, how do we handle a lot of markets? Obviously, all the product managers look at the features and how they impact various markets when we do A/B tests. And we always keep an eye on most important cities in some of our larger markets whenever we do some changes. And we're always careful to make sure that we indeed bring that added value to the experience, and it's reflected in the numbers.
Great. So there's also prioritization there on the city level. But I'm noticing a pattern. You launch first where you have employees. You need to watch out for some bias there, because I think your employees are your main customers.
No, I mean, like, we launch.
Joking, obviously.
So if you think of something like Bolt Market, actually a lot of the learning that needs to happen there is on the operational side, right? Like, you need to have a shop that we didn't have so far. Like, it's not like any of us knew how to operate a mini supermarket. So you need to have a few spaces, but the spaces need to have some sort of utilities associated to it. They need to have certain capacity. One of the funny things that we learned last summer is that because we sell a lot of beverages with Bolt Market, which means there's a lot of fridges that need to stay in there that generate a lot of heat. Estonia is a country that is not investing a lot in air conditioning because there's like 2 or 3 weeks of summer, and last summer was particularly long, particularly hot, and in our first shop there were particularly many fridges that were on to keep the drinks cold. Needless to say, it was quite warm in the shop for our employees, so that was not scalable. We immediately learned about the need of air conditioning during summer when you operate a large number of fridges, which is one of the, like, it sounds silly, but it's one of the things that, like, none of us operated in that environment before, and there was a lot of learning. Now, jokes aside, there's a bunch of learning that you need to do when it comes to tooling and the workflows, like an order comes, someone needs to go actually and pick up stuff and put it into a bag. Now, how do you reduce the amount of errors there? Like, you need tools, you need workflows, you need trainings. So in order to go from like one shop to 100 shops, you need a lot of processes, you need trainings. So all of these, that's what I said, that like learning has much more importance in terms of business execution than a lot of the efficiency of building the right code from the very beginning. So yes, we are learning, but again, from idea to launch, we did Bolt Drive in 4 months. We did Bolt Market in about 4 months. So we do learn a lot while doing, but we're also, the doing part goes really, really fast from like, hey, let's launch this product to an actual first order being delivered. And yes, like in the 1 or 2 weeks that we did a Bolt Market with our employees, we learned a lot. And we noticed a bunch of mistakes or corner cases that we haven't thought about. So when we actually started the consumer product, most of those problems were already fixed.
So when you're launching these new initiatives or large strategic initiatives, Do you assemble some sort of task force, like VP of product, of market, because it's probably touching platform as well, someone from operations? How's that team look like? And
so we always have very frequent focus meetings on potential new verticals, potential new areas where we can expand. And we're constantly analyzing and doing very deep, meaningful research into a lot of domains. We look into the unit economics. We try to understand the total addressable market. We try to understand if there's any, pockets of value in the market that the competitors are not exploring, or are not exploring the right way or the most efficient way. And this is when we make the decision. Because when you look at the grocery deliveries space as a whole, like we experimented with a bunch of options. We looked at the unit economics and eventually decided that where we would want to focus most of our attention is this fast grocery deliveries with like smaller number of SKUs, like smaller number of potential items on stock, small corner shops that we can digitalize and make sure that we can deliver those products in a very short amount of time. It's just because from our perspective, that's where the unit economics are best suited to continue investing in. But we do this with a lot of verticals. You, like, as a user, you would see the ones where we decided to invest, but there's a lot of thinking and analysis.
A lot of failed experiments.
Exactly, on a bunch of domains, and not just experiments. Like we are treating it as a business analysis for like 1 or 2 quarters in the leadership level before we start experimenting with one of these. And then, yes, we take one of the existing teams if it's something close to one of the existing teams. So when we did the Bolt Market, obviously we took one of the teams from Bolt Food that is doing the food delivery. They knew most of the stuff that happens in food delivery and the delivery aspect itself, the dispatching and so on. And they started focusing on the Bolt Market with new learnings and basically launching this product in 4 months from the moment we said, okay, let's allocate resources to this, let's start building.
Great. So I want to leave some time for audience questions. One last question from my side. We ask this question to all of our guests. If you could cast a spell that would allow to provide education on a specific topic to all 12-year-olds around the world, what topic would it be? What would you want them to learn?
Interesting. Not very related to what I do on a daily basis, but I would say taking care of your brain. From like a mental health perspective, taking care of your body from like a nutrition and physical movement part, and then taking care of your finances from like understanding how money works. If we would manage to achieve that with 12-year-olds, then we can move on to how to build an MVP, how to become an entrepreneur, and how to launch and scale successful products. But there are some things where like let's have some fundamentals in place before we create a generation of entrepreneurs, right?
Okay, I'll try to be fair here with the questions. Let's go from the top, at least the ones that I am seeing. Tomek Grinkiewicz asks, I'd be curious to learn what criteria do you use to validate product ideas at Bolt? We touched some of this, but maybe this question will make something new pop.
Yeah, so this will be a bit more focused on how we choose items that go on the roadmap. And basically, as I said, at the team level, the product manager discusses with the rest of the team, pulls together the list of potential ideas. They look into the merit of it, look at the data, look at the potential uplift that any feature is bringing. Then together with the engineering team, we have like a high-level estimation of how much work would be needed there. And then we have a priority list. Then on the priority list, you start digging a bit deeper to have a bit more granularity, to have the proper high-level requirements. So the engineering estimation can have, again, more granularity. Usually when things get more complex, you start to have a bit of dependency. So you need to spend a bit of time with the rest of the team to truly understand the total engineering cost on the organization, but also the total business impact. And then based on that, the result is an assumption of your potential ROI. And again, it's an assumption. If it's valid, usually the manager of each product manager is reviewing the proposed items. It's critically looking at the ROI estimation, because you tend to be sometimes a bit more self-absorbed, or you don't have the right scale. So some of those estimations can be adjusted in like higher or lower manner based on that, and it just leaves a very obvious, rational, and objective order of things that should be done. Now, obviously, you need to look at the right things and you need to measure them in the right way. So you need to have the right order of the KPIs. But if you have that, and at the company level you agree on that, then it should result in a very rational order of how to do things. And also, this is the way that we manage dependencies. Like even though it's a larger organization with a lot of dependencies, they are usually quarterly dependencies are done in 1 or 2 meetings. Why? For the same reason. Like all the roadmaps are perfectly aligned with using the same value scale, which is impact on business. And then we have the appropriate ROI. If there are like 2 features on different roadmaps that like one needs to go because one of the team needs to support the other team, it's quite a simple exercise because it's an ROI exercise. Like, is this helping? Which one of these is helping our business move faster? And if all the product managers agree on the measuring scale and the units of measure, then it's very hard to argue against the obvious. Of course, there's always strategic projects. We always leave room aside for code improvements. We always leave some room aside for certain things that we need to do on like defense side to make sure that technology-wise and scalability-wise things are okay. But then when you get to feature by feature comparison, we prioritize for highest ROI. But again, that is where the talent and the art of the product manager relies, because you need to find and surface the items that have those high ROIs. And you can calculate an ROI with like a very short-term improvement, or you can come up with like a 2-year vision, which is like 7 different things on top of each other, and you can argue with that respective ROI. Larger investment, larger impact, but still ROI to ROI makes sense to compare.
And when you're calculating this impact, the ROI, is it always like before it even leaves the room, before it even leaves the company, or is there already some sort of more higher confidence validation? Because I guess I understand you plan that, you have a discussion on your assumed ROI, like there's an assumption for ROI, but how do you validate it afterwards? When does it leave the building? Or did it leave the building at that stage already?
So if you look at the roadmap and the way that we look at ROI, we obviously model things around GMV, like total number of orders and total GMV that those orders have brought in. So if we fundamentally try to adjust for higher GMV, which means like higher earnings, then it's easy to do. It's easier to do the math around that. Now, if you as a company would optimize for something else, like number of visualization or time spent, if you're a social network, for example, you obviously have very different KPIs. So I'm referring to how we operate at Bolt, because our focus on ROI is extremely GMV focused and orders focused. But obviously, we have more granularity in a lot of the metrics here and there. But if you bring all of them together at the same place, it's easier to look at, like, should we build this feature to support ride-hailing, or should we build this feature to support food? In theory, they all cost 3 weeks of building on engineering time. But where can we deliver the highest impact on the business and on the market? Like, if we can create 2,000 more rides, 2,000 more orders on ride-hailing, or 2,000 more orders on food, then that's like extremely meaningful. But if you can create 2% improvement on orders, there's vastly more ride-hailing orders.
Yeah, but my question was more in the sense, not so much questioning the metric. So assuming ROI, I mean, you're telling me ROI is the thing that works at Bolt, so I'm trusting. My question was, after you've planned it in the roadmap and you deliver the feature, then what happens?
Okay, yes.
Yeah. When it leaves the building, that's what I meant by it. When it leaves the building, then what do? You kill it. You reduce the support to it. You leave the spaghetti code. You don't improve it, and you jump to the next thing that was the best assumption? How do you validate? How do you do that type of decisions? Do you go back to the other team that had a dependency and actually bring the thing that you removed in the roadmap if it didn't work?
I think that's rarely a one simple rule, just because features and scenarios are extremely different. But in general, what we do try to check is the actual impact it had on the market compared to what we initially estimated, and we're always learning from that. And also on the release scale, right? Like you build a feature, you have a set of assumptions, you test it in a few markets. If the initial results are confirming your assumption, then you can start thinking about continuing to release the product. Now, depending on the complexity of this, you might have released an MVP, and you know there's for sure a set of features that you have to support in the next 1 or 2 months, or there's like a nice to have set of features and you need a bit more learning to see what would be the next features to be added there. But you already understand that there's a meaningful impact. You probably don't understand all the impact. So based on how this, like the complex or how big the feature is, it can stop there, or it can continue the improvement with future iterations. And when you usually look at things, like whenever you try to improve something, you tend to look at the average. And you tend to look at the average and you say, hey, in order to improve this, we need to work on 3 items. But like one of them is probably going to deliver 70% of the overall impact. The next one is going to deliver the 15%, and the next one will probably deliver 5%. So you obviously pick the items that deliver the highest impact first, and that's where you do the MVP. If that works, you can move on to lower and lower, buckets of problems or buckets of solutions.
Got it. I'm trying to filter here because we're running out of time. Now I'm going to pick and choose questions. I'm not going to go by order. With such a high demand for tech talent nowadays, what's your approach to attracting top people? Radek asked.
So I would say some of the things that I noticed in Bolt. One of the things that a lot of our colleagues appreciate is this extremely high level of intellectual challenge. Precisely because we optimize for that, like we optimize to hire a lot of people that have critical thinking as one of their core fundamentals. We also have this very open communication on the same metrics. So we discuss rationally a lot, and everything is calculated in the same way, so it's easy to explain. So one of the things that we appreciate more is the fact that we get a chance to work with extremely smart colleagues. And we have this saying within the company that we challenge each other, but we mean well. And if you, with this, the Nordic style of communication is very direct, straight to the point, very little embellishment, but it doesn't have negativity around it. It's just like very direct, very concrete feedback, but it's very objective. So this is one of the things that people appreciate quite well. Then, as I said, like in terms of culture and in terms of work-life balance, I think we are in a pretty good place in Europe compared to other regions. But again, we try to give a very decent work-life balance to all of our employees, and again, this is one of the things that's quite appreciated. And then if you put all that in a setup of a well-run company with a high-growth business, then I think it meets a lot of the interesting, what I would call professionally interesting challenge. Because at the end of the day, like everyone pays the same, plus minus 20%, right? Like you're not going to find, one individual might find exceptions, but in general, you will not be underpaid or overpaid by more than 20%. The differences might come from equity, which is amazing when you're working for this like high growth company, because you have a lot of potential upside, less process, which makes the daily activity a bit more complex. But if you put that in the context of good culture and good work-life balance, I think this is an extremely interesting value proposition. So going back to your question, in this like extremely challenging domain today, I think if you pay your employees fair and you treat them fairly, but you give them a lot of interesting professional challenges and opportunities, you might attract a group of quite awesome, like-minded people. And that's why a lot of the folks at Bolt kind of like highlight these things, that yes, this is indeed a very nice company to work at.
Nice. So we're almost at the end. One more. question from Mateusz Krawczynski. The audience is getting more and more demanding. We see companies delighting users and competing with stellar experiences. Do you think it's getting harder and harder to enter a market with an MVP or the MVP approach? Any tips for someone who is not yet as successful as Bolt?
So whenever you look at any domain, I would say that innovation comes from obviously things change, but at every given moment, just because a lot of the things change, there's an opportunity to recombine the unit economics in a market in a way that you become more efficient. So what I would call is like you find pockets of efficiency. By using technology, by recombining existing elements, you can find areas that have not been exploited efficiently in the past for a variety of reasons. And even if you're a small company and you want to build an MVP, if technology now enabled something, or if social change enables something, let's not forget how ride-hailing started. It started after 2008, 2009, when there were a lot of people on the market looking for jobs, looking for extra revenue. So the companies that launched then just had an insanely cheap access to drivers, which was one of the preconditions. Like they figured out that there's this value on the market, people without a job, people willing to do this type of job, and they recombined. They use technology, they use GPS, they use smartphones, but they used supply on the market that was extremely available, and it was something that gave a huge opportunity to a lot of people to make a living. So if you are careful and you find these opportunities, some of them are extremely accessible to companies that are just starting up. And again, Clayton Christensen, Innovator's Dilemma, the whole, like we can talk 2 hours just on the topic of innovation and why smaller companies come and take the markets from like underneath with like horrible services at first, but precisely because the alternative is even worse, then those companies can grow. So yes, I'm a firm believer in MVPs. I'm a firm believer that in a lot of markets you can still create value with smaller teams and with less complex technical products.
So what you're saying is yes to MVPs, but you need to find the right opportunity.
Yes, like don't skip
MVP.
the working part, because like you still need to find that, again, idea stage, problem to solution fit, product to market fit. It's like we can, again, separate 2 hours on that topic alone.
Great. Thank you a lot for taking part in Disruption Talks. Thanks everyone who was in the audience. To those who could not see their questions answered, I'm sorry, but time is limited. And some of them might have been answered earlier than you joined, so you can watch back. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you, Pedro. Thanks, everyone.
You,
have Bye-bye. A great day.
Have a great day.